It's been 3 days since the brutal preseason cut of Season 14, 2024. Over the course of 2 match days, approximately 28% of the league was ripped from their rosters. Just gone. Just like that. If you're watching this, please sign us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. I am your sweet, sexy hunk of a host, Seagull choking on a hot dog, and this is the State of Recruit. I know. I'm sure you're all pissing yourselves with anticipation, waiting for the sweet, juicy recruit-flavored news that I'm about to bestow upon you. So, let's not wait any longer. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and without any further ado, let's get started with meeting your Season 14 starting rosters. Alright, folks, preseason is over with and donezo. We did have some standout performances from a few teams, but, let's be honest, folks, preseason games are really just glorified scrims at the end of the day. At this point in the season, teams really don't even know what their map pool is necessarily going to look like, let alone strats, execs, anti-strats, things like that. So we didn't get to see teams at their full power during preseason, but I did want to go through this now that each team has slimmed down to a 5-man roster. So we are looking at your starting 5 on each and every single team in CSC Recruit Tier this season. I'm not going to touch on every single player on every single roster, but I am going to touch on the most important needs of each team. I'm going to touch on who the IGL and the AWPer might be for each of these teams. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Let's take a look at your Season 14 starting rosters. First up, we have Abysswalkers, ABW, with a 10-1 record last season. They had the best regular season record in the recruit tier. They lost to NAN in the playoffs, but then again, so did everybody else. They managed to keep Synthronics with the entire rest of their roster being promoted to Prospect. And I believe Synthronics is going to be the IGL for this squad this season. They also picked up a Keljo from the draft to pick up the AWP for this team, so they'll be looking pretty strong with a solid IGL and a solid AWPer. That's good to see from a team like this. They are kind of in rebuild mode, but that's not a big deal, right? Here we go. Next up, we have Angry Pirates, AP. They struggled hard early on in Season 13. They did not have a good record going about halfway through the season. But about halfway through the season, Lance took over the IGL job, and they managed to bring things back around to make it into play-ins. They did lose to NAN in play-ins, but this was a huge run from them. They were actually the only team to beat Abysswalkers, the best team in the regular season last season. So we'll see if they can continue that success that they were able to find under Lance as the IGL. They did manage to sign cash money in free agency, and it looks like their draft pick, Barefooter, is going to be picking up the AWP, so that's going to be exciting stuff. Keep an eye out for Lance's fantastic I guess you'd call it frag movie diss tracks or something like that. Dude kills it every single time, I swear. Next up, we've got Atlantis, ATL. They lost one of their biggest fraggers in Enders to free agency. He went over to Headhunters Guild, and we'll talk more about him later. The IGL of the squad, Scary, is going to need some more firepower to complement his rifler, Lax, and AWPer, Wakeful. So we're going to have to wait and see if their draft picks will be able to pick up the slack there. I believe they will. They seem to have some very good draft picks there, but that's going to be ATL for this season. Next up is Deadbeats. Team captain Rymaster is going to lose his playmaker, his biggest playmaker, Tez, to the prospect tier. He got promoted in the offseason, but to replace him, they picked up Rhino with the number 6 overall pick. I've mentioned Rhino before on stream. Rhino has very good spray control, so if you rush at this guy, at least 3 of you are going down every single time, I promise. Team's looking really good for rifling power, but the biggest question on the Deadbeat squad right now is going to be who's going to pick up the AWP. nobody on this squad, at least according to Analytikill, is an AWPer at all. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see some of the DEs on this team, or maybe even some of the returning players from last season pick up that AWP and maybe come out of their shell a little bit, show us what they can do, right? So next up, we're going to have Drip, or also known as Wet. They made it to play-ins last season, but they did bow out. I believe they lost to Angry Pirates, if I remember correctly. But they did have a huge free agency pickup in Ruby Rax as their entry fragger. And I'm not kidding, folks. I think Ruby Rax is probably one of the best entry fraggers in the tier. He's extremely annoying to play with. He knows how to get under your skin. He's always sneaking around in smokes, just finding the weirdest play possible and making it work somehow. So we'll have to watch out for him this season. They've also brought in Bort as their new IGL. He was dropped down from Prospect, and I think Bort can be a very good IGL for this team. I think Bort has quite a bit of experience, and I think that's really what Wet needed. If we compare the team to last season, it felt like they kind of lacked a little bit of an identity, but I think with Bort as the IGL, they're going to come up with some really interesting strategies, anti-strats, execs, things of that nature. So lots of potential on this team, but let's see if they can capitalize going into the regular season. Next up, Headhunters Guild. Brand new recruit team for this season. Not a new franchise. They've been around for a little while, but their recruit team is fresh off the draft block. They did sign Enders in free agency, but it looks like they're promoting him to their prospect roster. That means that this is going to be a 5DE squad. So low experience, but that doesn't mean you should count them out. Lots of fragging power on this team. Catfish BTW was a star sub, basically a super sub from last season. Teddy S and Twinkle Toes were also draft pickups, and they are looking very strong on the rifles. After that, we're going to have Hellfire Union. They managed to keep Cameron King from last season, and they dropped down another rifler in Amaryllis from Prospect. I believe Amaryllis is actually a hybrid rifler and AWPer, so potential AWPer here. They do have a promising draft pickup in Jonesy, and it seems like from reports we've heard that he is going to be the IGL of the squad. So that's looking pretty good. Fresh IGL into the tier. We love to see that. We love it when people come out of the woodwork to do the IGL role, because it's really not an easy role to take up. So props to him for taking up that spot. Biggest question on Hellfire Union is going to be who's going to op. There are two hybrids on this team. There's I Am Arch and Amaryllis, who are vying for that potential spot. So will it be the more experienced prospect player in Amaryllis, or will it be the young gun DE in I Am Arch? I Am Arch is looking fantastic on the rifles and the AWP, by the way. So either of these two people who pick up whatever they decide to do, whatever way they decide to, split up these roles, this is going to be potentially a scary team going into, especially the early season. I think they can pick up some wins early. They'll be looking really good for the later half of the season. Next up, we've got NA Nades, the winners of Season 13, previous season. They are keeping Bun, DJ Jazzy Jess, and Clevey Wonder, all staying from last season. So the big question, I think, with NA Nades is they had a couple of promotions, notably Mr. Cool, who was their big fragging power. They do have some strong DE pickups in especially Coffin Eyes. So I'm going to be looking to Coffin Eyes to replace the fragging power that Mr. Cool left. And NA Nades is one of these teams that did not do well during the regular season. They just did okay. They had a relatively even roster. They scraped by and made it into play-ins. Then from play-ins, they were the number 9 seed, which is pretty much the bottom of the barrel. That was the very bottom seed in play-ins. But once they hit play-ins and playoffs, once it was lose or go home, they just flipped a switch. They were a brand new team. They looked completely different in the postseason than they did in the regular season, and they were destroying teams that they had no business beating. They were absolutely dumpstering them. Even in the finals, right, when they were playing Frog, they may have lost a map, but they were firmly in control of that game the entire time. So we're going to be looking for NA Nades to maybe continue their success that they had in the postseason, especially with 3 of their core players staying. But this is going to be a very interesting team to watch this season to see if they can repeat their success from last time. Next up is going to be Order of the Samurai OS. And they have a change in their IGL. Lineman Luke is going to be taking over from their longtime IGL Hector, who was promoted to Prospect. Pets is also going to be keeping the op duties from last season. Pets was the #1 overall draft pick in Season 13. He was very, very productive on the op last season, so we'll be looking to see more of that from him. They also picked up Spence in the free agency, and Spence is relatively unknown, at least in the recruit tier, but I believe he's played quite a bit in prospects, so we'll be looking at his rifling power later on in this season. They also drafted #7 overall Psych, a very solid player, and I think we should look to see him develop quite a bit this season. Also, shout out to Psych for sending in your preseason clips. We'll get to that in the next section. So I think the biggest question for Order of the Samurai was Luke paying attention to Hector's calls last season? Because Hector was doing very well with the IGL spot, and I'm going to be looking at Luke to see if he's doing some of the same calls. Is he going to be doing, some different execs? Is he going to be, a carbon copy, or is he going to have his own identity? I think he's going to do great. We'll just have to find out. But this team really does look scary to play against, guys, let me tell you. From their DEs to their keepers to their free agency pickups, this is looking like a top half team to me, at least. Next up, we've got DRG, Pact of Embers. Wee Little Pancake and Kill the Rainbow are the only 2 keepers from last season. They did receive the #1 overall pick in Abe722, who had a fantastic Combines rating, somewhere in the 1.3s. The guy was popping off, that's for sure. They do have lots of unknown talent on this team. Looking at guys like Saint Sparks and Gojira, this could be a really good sleeper team, actually, especially if Pancake can get her IGLing under control, and they can manage their economy and keep everything tightened up and done really well. I think DRG can be a really, really, really good team this season, so we should really watch out for them for sure. Next up is going to be Academics, ACA, another brand new recruit team for this season. 5 DEs, very unproven, very hungry. They're going to be looking to make a name for themselves here. So, and another thing to note is that they did not have any FA signings until after the draft, which from there, they signed Bismal, who was cut from another team. I can't remember exactly who, but it was another team that was facing some cap issues, so they had to cut someone with a higher MMR. Bismal's looking very, very scary to me. Bismal had one of the top 10 ratings for DE during Combines, so I think we should look to him as a potential top fragger for this team. We also don't know who the Opper and we don't know who the IGL is going to be for this team. I did take a look at Analytical. None of these players stand out as Oppers, so we're going to have to see who's going to pick it up. Will it be Bismal? Will it be someone else? Don't really know. This team's very unproven, shall we say. So let's see what they can do. They're going to be looking to prove themselves this season. I think they're going to be really exciting to watch, personally. Next up, we've got the Aviary. They had a drama-filled Season 13, which means they unfortunately missed out on playoffs. I'm not going to go over the drama here. It's been touched on in many other videos, many other group chats. You guys can go back and take a look at those if you're interested. Full rebuild mode for the Aviary. Razor's going to be leading the squad. They have no remaining players from last season. Everyone either got moved up to Prospect or went to a different roster. They picked up Uber Ponage with the #3 overall #3 overall pick in the draft, and Uber Ponage is a demon on the rifle. Guy's crazy. The big question here is going to be who's going to be the Opper on this team. Nobody stands out as an Opper in Analytic Kill. They're going to have to find someone, or will they just go with a 5 rifle setup? We don't really know yet. We're going to have to wait for match day 1 and 2 to kind of figure out what their setup's going to look like. But again, another potential sleeper team here. I'm looking at these guys kind of similarly to DRG. They could be another really good sleeper team, especially with Razor coming down for Prospect to lead the squad. I think that's a great decision by Hawkish from AVI. So we'll just have to wait and see what they can do. Next up is Savannah, Season 12 recruit champions. They are keeping UK Cats as their IGL and Nick Time Rush as their entry. UK Cats is a very, shall we say, storied IGL in the recruit tier. He's been around for a long time. The guy's got a strat book deeper than your garbage can. Like, this guy has every strat known to man in his book. I would be remiss if I didn't say that Sav is going to be a playoff team this season. I don't see them not making playoffs. They picked up number 2 overall in the draft, Solo, and Solo's going to be opping this season. He has some crazy highlights, so we'll be looking at him to potentially top frag for this team. They were a very powerful playoff team last season, but the big question is, can they run it back and win themselves another trophy? Next up, Totem Pole, FRG. And we've got Toast back as their op IGL. I believe they also kept Slayer from last season. But they did suffer from a lot of prospect move-ups. Guys like Penguins and Dewey Fan were moved up to prospect. And FRG, with Toast as the IGL, were the Season 12 back-to-back finalists. So they played Sav in Season 12 and lost. And they played NA Nades in Season 13 and lost. So maybe that's a little bit of a shell shock there, but I think with their free agency signing of CSC veteran Doxic, they might just be able to get themselves back into finals this season. But the big question is going to be, can they finally win it all? Can they do it? Can Toast do it? I don't know. Let's find out. Next up, UPS Upsetty Spaghetti. Mickwick is back at his second season as IGL. He's also keeping Nays and Goal Line Core being kept from last season, and they picked up my boy in free agency, BrassBiscuit. He's going to be opping for the team. No first-round picks, oddly enough, for Upsetty Spaghetti, but they do have a strong second-rounder in Omen to round out their roster, so this team is looking, dare I say, definitely better than last season. This looks to be an improvement in their roster to me, at least. I think this team can be very scary. If Brass can be productive on the op and Omen can keep, fragging out the same way that he was in Combines, especially if, Mickwick's IGLing keeps going well, if Nays and Goal Line Core can keep their fragging up, this could be a really scary team. Very easily, very easily. And last but not least, my favorite team, my baby, What Do You Beef, also known as Cow. We have Noble returning to the op IGL role on his Cadian arc. Fresh is going to return to entry frag. Huntwick as their number 8 overall draft pick and their new team captain, from what I've heard. We've also got Muffin Man with some crazy clutch potential and Banana as their support and resident PR team. If you haven't read his article, I would go read it. It was a very nice read. But I'll say this, and I would know this better than anyone because I was on Cal the last 2 seasons, if you didn't know. Cal has looked really good before. They've had really good rosters, very defined roles, makes sense. Every single signing that they've made just looks good. It looks like the right decision. But they've still struggled. They haven't had a season with more than 3 wins. So, boys, you know what to do. Go get some wins. I believe in you. This is looking like a really good roster to me. I see no complaints. They replaced a Seagull with a Wick. I mean, what else can you do, right? Shout out to Noble. Shout out to Fresh. Those are my boys. Shout out to all the Cow guys. Shout out to everybody in the league, actually. So thank you for watching the starting roster section of the State of Recruit. I'm going to send it back to the studio for some highlights. Let's go take a look right now. All right, just want to say a huge thanks again to everyone from the league who sent in their clips from this wonderful preseason that we had. So we've got quite a few clips to get through to show off here. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it.
Look, he went through this.
Holy fuck.
He just ran through.
Okay, there's still one lobby for sure.
Bottom.
Last backside, last backside.
Nice.
Holy crap.
Good save.
feel dirty after watching that. Okay, next section. Let's take a peek at the freshly minted Recruit FA pool. It's looking nasty this season. All right, little disclaimer before we get into our free agency discussion here, folks. This is being recorded on May 25th, a Saturday. As you all know, the preseason game 3 was postponed to Tuesday. Not a big deal, but what it does mean is that I don't know what our final free agency pool is going to look like, because there are still several teams that need to make cuts. At the end of free agency, if we look at the teams that still have cuts to make, we will have approximately 24 free agents in the pool this season. And let me tell you, that is way, way better than last season. Last season, I think we had about 7 at the most. So this is a huge change. I think we're going to see a lot of roster shuffling this season, because our free agency pool is actually really strong. Even now, even before teams have made their necessary cuts that they are forced to make, right? Even now, we have players that are looking like stars potentially in free agency, which is brand new for me. We didn't have that in season 12. We didn't have it in season 13 either, but now it looks like in season 14 there's going to be quite a bit of roster shuffling. So if you're on a starting roster, do what you can to stay on that starting roster. Good luck to you. I wish you well. But in free agency right now, we've got some really, honestly, really good players in free agency. I mean, we've got people from the draft like Swayze or Chronic, who are going to be looking like some very good fragging potential there. But we've also got veterans in the free agency pool. We've got veterans like Cool Guy here, who's been on many different rosters over the seasons. But FA Cool Guy? That's surprising to me. I see this man getting picked up fairly quickly. 0.97 HLTV rating. Not really an AWPer, but definitely a good support player. Definitely a good rifler. He's played for Sav in the past. He's played for Wet in the past. I believe he's also played for UPS in the past, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll look to see this guy probably get signed at some point during the season. We're also going to be looking at veterans like Twisted Agony. Played for quite a few different teams over the course of his CSC career. He was on Cal at one point. He was most recently on DRG. But Twisted Agony is a fantastic anchor player. So I think we'll see Twisted get picked up at some point during the season as well. But those are just some of the names in free agency. There are also some names that are yet to show up in free agency. So we're going to be watching our free agency pool here to just see what happens. And a quick note about free agency as a whole. If you're a free agent and you're watching this, there's a few things that you should watch out for if you're looking to get signed. Okay, first things first. Watch for pings in the free agent pickup channel in the CSC Discord. This is where GMs, AGMs, and team captains will post their substitution needs for that match day. So this is really important if you want to actually sub for a team. Second thing, FA Coliseum is going to happen about midway through the season. They do it every season, and for those of you who don't know, FA Coliseum is basically a talent showcase where GMs, AGMs, and team captains are going to watch you play. It's very similar to Combines. They're just another set of basically scouting 10-mans. And it's basically letting them decide if they want to make any final roster changes before the free agency cutoff date towards the end of the season. Third thing, I just mentioned it, at some point towards the end of the regular season, there's going to be a cutoff date where teams are no longer allowed to change their roster for the remainder of the season. The only exception to this is for players who are being placed on injured reserve or IR. So likely you won't be signed after this date if you're a free agent, but you can still substitute for the rest of the season, and I highly recommend doing that. I've seen a lot of people who are on starting rosters now who were free agents in the past 2 seasons, and now they're on starting rosters. But the more that you sub, the more that you make a name for yourself, the more likely it is that you are going to get signed, and you are going to be a mainstay on one of these rosters. So that's it for our FA deep dive. Let's move on to our match day 1 and 2 matchups. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's look at some upcoming games. We're going to do a section like this every episode of the State of Recruit, and we're going to be taking a look at the featured matches for each match day. Every single team is going to get featured at least once this season, so don't worry if you're not featured in the very first episode. And after the match has concluded, TSOR is going to be uploading a highlights video for that match, so stay tuned for that. And without further ado, these are your Match Day 1 games, folks. Featured game of the night for Match Day 1 is going to be Drip versus NA Nades. And let me tell you guys, the storylines run super thick here. These are two very storied teams within CSC, and not only do we have the literal Season 13 underdog champions of the league in NAN, but their opponents are none other than Wet, who was NA's first postseason victory to start off that historic run that they just had, not too long ago. So, this is going to be a very interesting game. This might be a bit of a revenge match for Wet, for them getting knocked out of the playoffs by NA. And let me tell you, this is a new look Wet, right? Wet has put together what looks like a beast of a team. They've got their fresh IGL in Bort. They've got their flashy FA signing with Ruby Rex. So this rematch might go differently, or maybe NA Nades is going to keep their streak going. We don't really know yet. So will Wet become the next super team? Will NAN keep their streak going and just become a juggernaut? We don't really know. We don't know yet. These are tough questions, but you'll just have to go watch that highlight reel that I mentioned to go find out, so stay tuned for that. Next up, moving on to Match Day 2, here are your games for this beautiful Thursday night. And our featured game that we have for Thursday, Match Day 2, is none other than the Aviary versus Pact of Embers. So coming off of a drama-filled Season 13 for Aviary, they have gone full rebuild mode. No keepers from last season. They did drop down a former prospect player in Razor to lead the squad, and he's looking like he's going to be a very good IGL for this team here. And they also picked up the number 3 overall pick in Uberponage to round out their fragging department. And with all that said, we're also looking at a new look for DRG, a team who's only keeping Wee Little Pancake and Kill the Rainbow from last season. But they had the number 1 overall pick with Abe722, and he has a very high rating. So we'll have to see how their fragging department does with a few of DRG's players being moved up to prospect. This is going to be an exciting game, folks. So I guess the questions here are, will AVI's rebuild plan work? And also, will DRG be the sleeper team that I seem to think they will be? If you go watch our video, once it comes out, you guys can find out. All right, folks, that's going to wrap up our first episode. We're all done here. I have been Seagull. This has been the State of Recruit, and you have been my lovely captive audience. So thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Really means a lot to us. And see you bunch of nerds in the next episode. Bye.